Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Epidose. These crazy people that just eat meat and can't stop talking about it. I'm Tom. The channel, of course, is Meat Mosaic, and what we do here is we talk about living a meat-based lifestyle, as they like to say. So, if that's something you're interested in, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We discuss all kinds of things, different health problems people have resolved, athleticism, excelling in a sport and stuff like that comes up quite frequently. And a lot of it's about day-to-day life, what people are eating, how they source it, how they prepare it, and how much they enjoy it. So today's topic is actually how long do humans live? And if you look it up, the projections are somewhere between 120 and 150 years. It's typically what they figure the human being is sort of engineered to have a lifespan of. And when you get to a certain age, things like your lungs and possibly your heart and stuff like that start to give out because they're not being repaired. So there's a certain seems to be a certain amount of limitation on just how much we could regenerate some of our organs. And of course, technology will probably solve that one day. Perhaps they'll be growing you new lungs in a fish tank somewhere, or maybe there'll be some sort of gene therapy or whatever. Little tiny robots will go in and repair things. So, anyways, the reason why I brought it up is because frequently when the discussion comes up with people about just eating meat, and I mentioned that, in the past, that's what human beings mostly ate. It's rare to find ancient civilizations that could get even 20% of their calories from plants, because the quintessential question is really, what plants were people eating? Because most of the plants you buy in a grocery store today just weren't available, and that most of them are hybridized or crossbred to be edible, because most of their wild varieties are just not edible. So um that in the ones that were, because there are things like berries and grapes, wild berries or grapes and stuff out there, but of course uh they're seasonal, and you got to compete with all the pests and other animals that like to eat them. So that kind of narrows it down. There are starchy tubers in particular that people found and ate and stuff like that. And in some areas you find nuts and stuff that people ate. But largely the evidence shows that we ate meat. We hunted animals. We hunted animals up until the time we hunted megafauna, very large animals, up until they started disappearing. And then we had to start eating smaller animals. Um, and there's lots of evidence for us eating things like mammoths. They were apparently quite popular back in the day. So there's all kinds of mammoth traps all over the world, mammoth bones that were clearly harvested by human beings who built their home out of them. The legendary Gravidian mammoth hunters were the tallest people of the old world. Most of the taller populations in the world trace their ancestry back to them. And it's surmised that they grew to be so tall. The men were usually something like 5'10" to 6'2", which was very tall for back in the I guess that would be the upper Paleolithic era. So one of the reasons why they think they're so tall is because they were so well fed. So, and of course, there's not much vegetation to eat in cold climates anyways, and most of these woolly mammoths thrived in areas that were relatively cold. So anyways, I get that question, and I say, well, that's what we've been eating for a long time. I mean, the oldest known fossil that I'm aware of is that shows that some sort of pre-human was cutting the flesh off the bone is like 3.7 million years old. That's a long time ago. And uh, a lot can be said about the evolution of the human being, and that comes about um, both through environmental influences and hybridization. I know I know a lot of people think it's kind of an odd concept, but we're all actually hybrids. We have all been mixing our genes for a very long time. We didn't just we probably think of most of the world as like white people and Asian people and black people, and then some mix thereof. You get people who are Middle Eastern people, you know people from Latin America and Spain, are kind of grouped together. And but the truth is we've been hybridizing for a long, long time, and we're not really we're definitely not a separate species. So we just carry different genetic traits. But unless you don't believe in genetics and you don't think the unraveling of the human genome and the tracking of the haplotype groups is real science, then it's pretty obvious that humans are all humans, and we've been mixing for a very long time. So how long do we live? What's the optimal diet? And is there any sort of proof? And when you say that for all this time we've been primarily eating meat, and people say, what, like in the Stone Age, during the Ice Age, whatever, when people lived to be 25 and then they all died, what good is that? And the silly part of that about that argument is not so much how long people live, because, well, let's face it, there was no healthcare of any kind, really. And people hunting animals is a dangerous business. There's no firearms, there's no Kevlar, there's no snake gators, so um everything that happens to you, every accident is potentially fatal, right? You break an arm, you get frostbite, you get mauled by a tiger or wolf, or the neighbor, whatever. That's potentially life ending. And then, of course, a lot of people died in infancy or before the age of 5. When you take away all the deaths before the age of 5, then the numbers are skewed quite a bit older. Other than that, if you include all the people that die but by the age of 5, then we're talking about a upper limit of an upper average of 33 years or so. So in that, you can't necessarily look at their diet and say their diet was a limiting factor, right? But the diet is a tremendous contributing factor to genetic evolution, and we're talking over millions of years. So what did we evolve to eat is the real question, not does eating meat cause you to live only as long as somebody in the Stone Age, right? Because that doesn't make any sense. So anyways, I think the best thing to do is redirect the conversation to evolution from people's impression of how long Stone Age people lived. So anyways, you'll see that, like, if you look at the numbers, there's actually a dip during the Bronze Age. People were dying off faster. But clearly what happens is, as we learn to cultivate crops, then more diseases appear. And those diseases are directly linked to what we suffer from the most in modern times. Things like heart attacks, cancer, Alzheimer's, these top killers, type 2 diabetes, of course, very prevalent. And that, most people have type 2 diabetes for a long time. They usually die of heart disease. So we know that type 2 diabetes and heart attacks are intimately intertwined. And really, the only reason why people live that long with type 2 diabetes is because of modern intervention, because of medications. The fact that when you get diabetic lesions in your lower extremities, when you get those sores that won't heal, eventually a skilled surgeon amputates your foot or your leg or both or whatever, and that prolongs your life. You could imagine if that were happening in ancient times, what are they going to do? So you probably wouldn't survive the amputation if they even tried to amputate it, right? So anyways, but those diseases apparently didn't exist back then. Things like cancer and heart attacks were really rare. People did get infections, usually probably from injuries and parasites, right? Parasites are still a problem today. So we don't suffer as much from things like parasites and a number of infections because of sanitation. And sanitation alone is probably the most impactful in prolonging human life, just not drinking contaminated drinking water, not being exposed to pestilence from rodents and stuff like that, which are, controlled a lot better these days. You know, not being exposed to pestilence spread by things like fleas and lice and stuff like that as well. There's a lot less of that these days. And if you do get sick from that, then there's medicines to treat you, right? Things like antibiotics and vaccinations and stuff like that prolong human life. So, but in the end, the conversation really still goes back to, what did the human machinery evolve to eat? Human beings, like most animals, are adaptive, right? We have a complex set of genes that basically turn on and off or regulate the production of proteins. And a lot of that is influenced by our environment. So over time, those things become sort of embedded and passed on, right? So these adaptations sort of come along, and when they're advantageous to survival, then they're handed down, right? And if you look at the hard evidence, like the archaeology, the biology, even the physics of it, because they measure nitrogen isotopes and some other isotopes in the cartilage, which a lot of people are surprised to find out. I was surprised too, that cartilage survives in fossils for like up to 30 or 40,000 years. When you extract that, they can tell what that animal, including human, was eating. And we clearly were eating other animals to a large extent, and very little plant material. So in fact, a lot of the plant material was consumed was merely the stomach contents of the animals that we were hunting. So, and this is true just not of modern humans, but of pre-humans as well. So a lot of them were uh, apex predators, carnivores. And does that mean we ate no plants? No, it doesn't mean we didn't eat any plants. And how many plants we ate would probably depend on how well the hunting was going and how much plant was available. If you go back and you look, you find out there weren't hardly any plants available that were edible. Even things like the common potato, it's a modern hybrid slash crossbred tuber that's edible. All the wild potatoes are poisonous to human beings. So you either have to have some process to detoxify them, or you have to breed them into something that's less toxic. And an argument can be made that, even the humble modern potato is mildly toxic because it still has plant toxins in it, like all plants do. So all plants produce pesticides to keep humans and other creatures from consuming them, right? That's their defense mechanism, because plants can't move, they don't have claws and teeth, as the story goes, so they use chemistry to fend off predation. And that's why most plants in the world are toxic to human beings. And even in the animal world, you find a lot of animals specialize in a particular plant or a very small group of plants that they can eat. There aren't that many animals that really have a varied diet. So it's not too surprising that humans being truly omnivorous, still have a very limited capacity to eat plants. And while we are omnivorous, our diet has consisted primarily of meat. And it doesn't really matter how long cave people lived, because they weren't dying of the type of things that kill us now, like heart attacks and cancer and type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's, right? And who doesn't know somebody who's suffering from stuff like that? And of course, if we just look at something as common as a kidney stone, we find out 80% of all kidney stones are oxalate based. Your body can't get rid of enough of the oxalate, combines it with calcium to neutralize it, and then it winds up stored all over the place, including your kidneys. That's how most people get kidney stones. So there's some direct evidence there that a lot of people should really be eating a low oxalate diet, so they don't have too much oxalate in their system. You need some, your body even produces some, but the abundance of it tends to come from plant sources. So anybody can Google it. There's lots of plants out there that that contain things like oxalates and phytic acid and stuff like that. And the problem with phytic acid is that it tends to bind up nutrients. So you're eating food, even if that plant might have some nutrients in it, it's very hard to absorb because it's chemically bound to other compounds that make it essentially not able to be absorbed, and it just passes through your system. And a lot of nutrients are just trapped with fiber. Fiber passes through the body, takes a lot of nutrient and moisture with it, water with it. So when you look at a chart and it says, oh, this, spinach or whatever has this, and that in it, just because it's in there doesn't mean you get to absorb it, because quite a bit of it is just going to pass through you. Whereas if you're eating meat almost completely breaks down by the time it gets to the end of the small intestine. So you chew it up, goes into your stomach acid works on it. Your saliva is already working on it. Enzymes in your saliva are working on it. You did the mechanical work of chewing. And then it goes into your small intestine where the microbes are breaking it down, breaking apart the proteins into amino acids and passing them through the intestinal wall into the bloodstream. Whereas with plants, there's a lot less of that going on. That's why when you eat a lot of plant material, a lot more material exits out as waste. So with meat, there's considerably less because quite a bit more of it is readily absorbed. And so right there, we see that our ancient ancestors that lived on a heavy meat diet, they were more effectively feeding themselves, and they were actually consuming far fewer toxins by avoiding plants, because we really don't have any evidence of us even mastering fire or using fire till 100 200,000 years ago. And a lot of the detoxification that we do now requires things like heating it, soaking it. Where were the pots to soak things in? Maybe you could make a pouch out of hide or something and soak stuff. But I'm sure it was a very long time before people started finding ways of detoxifying plants. They'd go and they'd sample it, made you sick, you didn't eat it, right? You didn't sit around all day wondering, how am I going to stop this thing from making me sick? Am I going to soak it in water? Am I going to pray to the gods, or what am I going to do? Right. So there's very little evidence in the physical world that we were eating these plants and there's good reason why we would avoid them. On the other hand, there's lots of physical evidence that we were eating meat. And so I think it's fair to project that in the future, we're going to find out that eating meat is one of the best ways for us to live as long as possible, because of the thorough nutrition. The nutritional density and the completeness of something like red meat is unparalleled elsewhere, especially in the plant world. Plant proteins, plant fats are inferior to animal fats and animal proteins. Animal proteins and fats um, are less nutritious. There's some essential things in that are not present in any plants, and many that are rare. I grew up thinking eating carrots was good for you. That's how you got your vitamin A. And lo and behold, you find out that there isn't really vitamin A in a carrot. There's beta carotene. Beta carotene is like a molecule that's essentially two retinol molecules stuck together, and that can be converted into vitamin A. However, only about 50% of the people on the planet bodies can do that work. And of that 50%, a lot of people can only get a tiny amount. So somewhere between, 0 and maybe 50% conversion rate for half the population. So right there, you find out that, when you eat the animal product, you're absorbing the actual vitamin A. It goes into your system without a problem. And then the plant, one of the plant sources that's commonly touted as being a great source really is an inferior source. And of course, it comes packaged with all the things, the natural pesticides, the fiber and everything. The fiber that they told us was so good and was going to make the difference, and you'll eat less because you'll feel more full and it'll clean out your colon or whatever, and really now people are starting to realize that a lot of fiber is really just an irritant. And a lot of people are finding out that their lower bowel problems are worsened by fiber, not improved by it. And there's good studies that back this up. One I keep quoting says something like only 24% of people that were suffering from idiopathic constipation were improved their situation by eating a high fiber diet. So that means 75% of the people um, were not helped by it, and of course a good number of them, it just made their problem worse. It just made it harder to have more difficult to have a bowel movement instead of making it easier. So, and if you listen to all the anecdotal sort of reports from people on the carnivore diet, you quickly find out that people suffer from things like constipation for many, many years. It just goes away. They just have normal bowel function from then on, as do a lot of the other sort of digestive issues. So, anyways, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that plant-based nutrition really is a poor substitute. And if you wanted to have a complete nutrition from plants, you have to go out and mix all kinds of different things together, and then you're still going to need artificial supplementation. So it doesn't really make any sense. And so I like to consider this a response to the people who say, well, how could eating meat be a useful sort of path when our ancient ancestors only lived to be 33? Well, this is the complicated answer. The complicated answer is it's not so much related to how long our ancient ancestors lived. It's related to how the human beings, the species, evolved. And we evolved as meat eaters. And thus says the hard science. So anyways, if you want to put all your faith in nutritional epidemiological studies where people fill out surveys and supposedly remember what they ate for the last 20 years, then the plant-based crowd's probably more your crowd. If you like the archaeology, the biology, and the physics of it, if you like studying the Paleolithic, the Neolithic, the Bronze Age, the classic Greek age, and all that, and looking at what people actually ate, what they left in their habituation sites, what they painted on cave walls, you probably do well in the meat-based community, because I think the evidence is overwhelming. So does a lot of other people. A lot of other people have done a lot of work on it. So, and there are new studies coming out all the time. So there's such a massive volume of studies coming out that nobody can really keep up, but we can keep reading them, and we can keep comparing them and supporting people who do more studies. So anyways, until next time, if you enjoyed the conversation today, I know today's a little shorter, and I'm solo, so there's no banter, there's no back and forth with the other meatheads. But if you enjoyed it, hit the like button, leave us your comments, maybe give us an idea what sort of evidence you see for the longevity of human beings, and why you think your way of eating is the best one. That's always an interesting conversation. And go ahead and pick up a mammoth femur and smack that like button, and eat some meat and feel better. And whatever you do, don't fall down the carb hole.